The knock on my front door at exactly 11 o'clock that night didn't sound desperate at first. It sounded polite. 3 slow taps that disappeared into the silence of the neighborhood. But something about it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I had been sitting alone in my living room after a long day, watching rain soak the quiet streets outside my window, convinced that nothing unexpected would ever happen in my life again. I was wrong. When I opened the door, I didn't find my ex-wife. I found the man she had left me for, standing under the porch light, completely drenched by the rain. His face was pale, his hands were trembling, and behind him, parked crookedly along the curb, was my ex-wife's car with its hazard lights flashing in the darkness. Before I could ask why he was there, he looked straight into my eyes and quietly said that she had whispered only one sentence before losing consciousness. She had said that I was the only person she could think of. Before we continue, if you believe kindness is stronger than revenge and that everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who loves emotional stories, and subscribe to Midnight Love Stories. Your support helps us bring more heartfelt stories to life. For almost 4 years, I had trained myself not to think about Marissa anymore. Our marriage had ended in a way that left scars no one could see. We had once built dreams together, painted the walls of our little house together, laughed over burned dinners, and imagined growing old on a quiet porch somewhere outside the city. But dreams can disappear quietly. They rarely explode. They fade one disappointment at a time until 2 people wake up as strangers sharing the same roof. When Marissa walked away, she didn't scream or accuse me. She simply admitted she had fallen in love with someone else. That someone was a younger man named Nolan, full of energy and confidence, everything I believed I no longer was. I signed the divorce papers without arguing because love cannot be negotiated. Watching her leave was the hardest thing I had ever survived. After the divorce, I sold the house because every room reminded me of promises that no longer existed. I moved into a smaller place on the edge of town, buried myself in work as a furniture craftsman, and slowly rebuilt a life that was quiet but peaceful. I had accepted that some chapters simply ended without happy endings. That was why seeing Nolan standing on my porch felt unreal. His expensive jacket was soaked through. His usual confidence had disappeared. His eyes were red, not from drinking, but from fear. He explained everything while standing in the rain because neither of us seemed capable of moving. Marissa had collapsed unexpectedly earlier that evening after complaining about severe dizziness. She had insisted she didn't need an ambulance because she thought it was only exhaustion. Instead, Nolan had driven her toward the hospital himself. Halfway there, she became weaker. Her breathing changed. She could barely keep her eyes open. Then, in those fading moments, she grabbed his wrist and whispered my name. Not her parents. Not her sister. Not her closest friend. Mine. Nolan admitted he had almost ignored her request. Pride nearly convinced him to keep driving without looking back. But guilt finally won. He turned the car around and drove straight to my address, the one she had apparently memorized years ago. I didn't know what to feel. Anger. Confusion. Curiosity. Or the old ache I thought had disappeared forever. I grabbed my keys without another question. The rain was relentless as we hurried toward the car. Marissa was unconscious in the passenger seat, her breathing shallow, strands of wet hair clinging to her face. She looked nothing like the woman smiling in our wedding photographs. Life had softened and exhausted her at the same time. Without hesitation, I called emergency services while Nolan drove toward the nearest hospital. Every red traffic light felt like an enemy. Every passing second felt heavier than the last. Inside the emergency room, doctors rushed her away before either of us could follow. The waiting room became one of the longest nights of my life. Neither Nolan nor I spoke for almost an hour. We were 2 men connected by the same woman, sitting only a few feet apart, carrying completely different versions of the same heartbreak. Eventually he broke the silence. He admitted that their relationship hadn't been the fairy tale everyone imagined. The excitement that had once brought them together slowly disappeared under bills, responsibilities, and ordinary life. They argued more than they laughed. Marissa often seemed distant, spending evenings staring through windows instead of watching television with him. He confessed something that surprised me. She never stopped talking about kindness. Not romance. Not regret. Kindness. Whenever they argued, she would quietly mention how patient I had always been. How I never raised my voice. How I fixed broken things around the house without complaining. How I always remembered birthdays, anniversaries, and the little details everyone else forgot. Listening to him felt like opening an old photo album I had buried years ago. Maybe I hadn't been perfect. Maybe I had worked too much. Maybe I had stopped expressing my feelings. But perhaps love had never completely disappeared. Perhaps it had simply changed shape. Several hours later, one of the doctors finally approached us. Marissa had suffered a serious neurological episode caused by an undiagnosed medical condition. She had arrived just in time. Waiting another 30 minutes could have changed everything. Relief swept across the room like sunlight after a storm. She was alive. That was enough. The following afternoon she finally opened her eyes. I hadn't planned to be standing beside her bed. Yet there I was. When she noticed me, tears formed almost instantly. No words came. She simply cried. Sometimes apologies exist beyond language. Over the next several days, I visited only because the nurses kept asking if I could help complete paperwork. Her parents lived across the country and couldn't arrive immediately. Nolan rarely left the hospital either, though exhaustion was beginning to show across his face. Something unexpected happened during those long hospital days. The bitterness I'd carried for years slowly began dissolving. Not because what happened between us stopped hurting. But because pain looks different when someone is fighting simply to stay alive. One afternoon I wandered into the hospital garden for fresh air. The summer sun finally broke through the clouds after days of rain. Flowers bent gently in the breeze. Families sat together on benches celebrating recoveries that probably felt miraculous. That's when Marissa slowly walked toward me with the help of a nurse. She looked fragile. Thinner. Older. Human. She sat beside me without speaking. The silence wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was familiar. Eventually she admitted she hadn't called for me because she wanted another chance. She called because in the moment she believed she might die, her mind searched for the safest person she had ever known. Not the most exciting. Not the wealthiest. Not the most romantic. The safest. Those words landed deeper than any apology ever could. I realized something painful. Sometimes people don't understand the value of peace until chaos becomes their everyday life. She explained that leaving me had been entirely her decision. She didn't blame anyone else. She accepted every consequence that followed. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She simply wanted me to know that I had mattered far more than she ever admitted while we were together. I didn't answer immediately. Forgiveness isn't a switch. It's a journey. Days later she was discharged from the hospital. Her parents finally arrived. Nolan helped carry her bags to the car. Before leaving, he walked over to me. He thanked me. Not because I saved her life, but because I never used her weakest moment to punish either of them. He admitted he wasn't sure their relationship would survive everything that had happened. For the first time, I realized I genuinely wished them peace, whatever that looked like. Weeks passed. Life slowly returned to normal. Or at least something close to normal. Then one Saturday morning I received a handwritten letter. It wasn't long. Inside was a photograph from years ago. It showed Marissa and me covered in paint while renovating our first home, laughing so hard neither of us noticed the camera. On the back she had written only one sentence. Thank you for reminding me that kindness never truly disappears, even after love changes. I placed the photo inside a drawer rather than on a shelf. Some memories deserve respect without becoming destinations. Life continued moving forward. I accepted more furniture commissions. Started volunteering on weekends teaching woodworking to teenagers who needed direction. Slowly, my empty house became less lonely. Not because someone new moved in, but because I finally did. If this story has touched your heart so far, please like, comment, share this video, and subscribe to Midnight Love Stories. Your support allows us to continue sharing stories that remind us compassion is never wasted. Special request, before this story ends, please comment below, kindness always finds its way back. We'd love to know where you're watching from and what part of this story touched you the most. That rainy night didn't bring my marriage back. It didn't erase betrayal. It didn't rewrite the past. Instead, it taught me something far more valuable. The people who hurt us sometimes remember our kindness long after they forget our sacrifices. Forgiveness doesn't always rebuild relationships, but it always rebuilds the person willing to let go. And sometimes, the greatest act of love isn't holding on to someone who walked away. It's opening the door when they need help, expecting nothing in return, and quietly walking back into your own future with peace finally resting where bitterness once lived.